So anyway, I decided to look at practical poverty. So what is practical poverty? According to Health and Human Services, one single individual, the poverty level is $10,830 a year. I thought that's ridiculous. So I went and got national expenses, and I understand we're in Tomah where rent might not be the national average, but these are all based on national averages, okay? National average for rent, $1,000. National average for car insurance, $144.66. Cell phone, $73. I wish. Utilities, $264. Cable and internet, $163. I wish. Food, $332. Now these are for single people. Gas, $220. Car payment, $466. 10% for retirement, because everybody's doing that, right? Yeah. $385. College loan payment, $575. Life insurance, $33. Health insurance, $402. Now, you have to put into their tax, too. You know how much money you have to make to have no money left over? $69,800 a year. $70,000 a year is poor in America. The math is right. When I first wrote this, I had a CPA firm that volunteered to do the math for me again. Because they're like, this cannot be right. There's no way that $70,000 a year is practical poor. And they did it, came back, and said, Josh, this is the most honest article we've seen in 30 years. Because it's true. So even when we look at economic development, when we hear politicians or whoever say, well, we're gonna get wages up 4%. That means I went backward 6. Drowning in 10 feet of water is still as dead as drowning in 12 feet of water. Make sense? So then I looked at how employers in this room are going to hate me by the end of this because your employees are going to want to quit. Happens all the time. I did this once in an event. The small business guy brought 15 employees with him. 12 of them quit. I said it was for small business owners. You shouldn't have brought the employees. That's like letting kids see how you wrap the presents. All right, go back to my notes. So then you have this idea, well, Josh, I would love to start a business, but isn't there a bunch of regulation in the way? Yeah, it depends on what business you want to start. Regulation should never be the excuse to stop you from starting a business. I know somebody in prison right now, and they... That's all I'm going to say about that. But if you need a magazine, there's a hookup. If you need some cigarettes, there's a guy. So if somebody can start a business in an 8x8 cell, don't give me the excuse of, well, Josh, I can't start a business. There's all this red tape. For what you want to start? Yeah, maybe. Maybe. They'll say, well, Josh, I saw the Stossel report that it takes $1 million to start a cab company in New York City. Absolutely. Well, see, they're trying to kill the little guy. Absolutely. Well, now I can't start my business. Why? Go to New Jersey. It's like we use these excuses as if, well, the reason I can't start a business is because of XYZ. BS to your XYZ. And contact people like Nancy. I've known Nancy now for probably 4 or 5 years. Contact people like Nancy, because that's what she's there for. To say, hey, you know what? I want to start a business, but I don't think I can. And if you can't, then do something else. Listen, I love the idea of doing what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Totally love it. And if you're that lucky, hallelujah, kiss the ground. But when I talk to millions of people a day, most people are not that lucky. The honest truth is, do what works. Do what works. How many people hate what they do for a living if you're an employee? There's a banking study that came out, but you still do it anyway, by the way. There's a banking study that came out after the Great Depression because they were trying to figure out why is everybody having an economic challenge here. And they found that 98% of employees, regardless of how much they make, will be dead or broke by their 65th birthday. The most dangerous place is employment. If you're under 45 and you have a job, odds are you will die at work. That sounds fun, doesn't it? I had a cardiologist on the show, and I asked him, I said, Doc, what's the #1 cause of disease, illness, heart attacks, all that sort of stuff? He said stress. I said, what's the #1 cause for stress? Employment. So there's a connection there. And, for all you employees who are about to quit, in the book, Quit Your Job or Die, I compared employment to prison. Now think about this for a second. In prison, you get to go outside and exercise. You don't at work. In prison, you can take personal phone calls. You can't at work. In prison, they want you to have visitors. You can't at work. In prison, you get conjugal visits. That's so I've heard. You can't at work, usually. So, honestly, you start thinking to yourself, am I really free? And what's the point of work anyway? Okay. Next thing that comes up is, Josh, how much education do I need? What do I need to know? And what I'm covering is, because I told Steve was like, Josh, what do you want to talk about? I said, well, I want to talk about small business, big solutions. Because I love small business. Small business to me is businesses from startup to 50 million a year. That's small. And to me, that's where everything is driven from. So the question that usually comes up is, Josh, what sort of education do I need? And the answer is, you need more drive and creativity than education. When I reference that textbook from 1929, that first chapter, How to Pay Your Employees, that's for 7th graders. If you grab a 7th grade textbook now, and this is why I have a little bit of a hard spot in my heart for modern education, not that it's educators' fault, just the system itself. You go to a 7th grade classroom now, that math textbook is going to be 2.5 inches thick. It's going to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of nothing but repetition. Do questions 1 through 50, skip the odd ones, blah, 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 blah. That's not teaching creativity. You know how, and that's why I said, in this country, and depending on which study you look at, we have anywhere from 27 to 32 million small business owners. Very few of them are actually entrepreneurs. And the difference is creativity, which is why I also am not a huge fan of MBA programs. It's amazing how many MBAs have to come to my course to fix what they learned in MBA school. Not because the teachers were bad, and not because the school didn't support entrepreneurship, but because in order to grade something, in order to teach it in mass, it has to be something that somebody's done before. It has to be replicatable. Well, what drives success in business is doing what's exactly not done before. So just by pure logic, if we wrote this out as an equation, you come to this problem where they're teaching the very thing. I mean, if I taught 250 million people to all start, thrift stores or something, and you all started thrift stores, how successful would we be? Hence the problem. So when you have a textbook going into 700 colleges and they're all teaching the exact same thing, you're going to get the exact same results, and it's always based on stuff that people like me did 5 years ago. To be honest, what they teach in business school is what Google did in the 90s. Well, this is how Google got started. That was the 90s. You're 2.5 decades behind. So there's a lot of truth to that. So as far as education, you need more creativity. And how dangerous is this lack of creativity? Legos almost went out of business. The little toy, you step on them, you think you just died. Those things. Legos almost went out of business because they started to notice in the mid-'80s, kids weren't buying Legos. You know why? Because they didn't know what to do with them. You used to get a box, remember? And there used to be the little wheel and then the little driver guy and some flat pieces and an angle piece, and you'd come up with some sort of weird elephant car or something. And you just played. But they noticed, because of the way we teach our kids to replicate, duplicate, replicate, duplicate, kids would get this bucket and just look at it. And then they decided, well, let's make a pirate ship. And then they started selling again. Because even our kids needed to be told what to do to play. And that's a massive, massive problem. It's one of the problems that I first run into when I coach businesses, because I'll ask them things like, what are you doing to grow your business? And they say, well, I'm following the handbook that, okay, you're not going to grow. What are you doing to actually grow your business? So you have to think creatively, you have to think outside the box. We'll touch on some of those in a minute too. The other one is, Josh, how much money do I need? If I'm going to start a business, and I went to this to work for my boss, and I heard you talk about this thing, and I wanted to go in the bathroom and puke after you were done, because I realized I'm never getting to 70 grand. How much money do I actually have to need to start a business? And the answer is none. It does not take money to make money. If that were true, everybody would be sharing the original $10 bill. It doesn't work that way. I've helped people start businesses with no money, $0. I had one guy, I was helping his boss, and he comes over to me and he goes, Josh, I want to start a business too. Now, isn't it sick in America that you have to keep that a secret? That was a learning point. But I said, okay, well, what do you know how to do? What do you want to do? And he goes, well, I kind of want to get into firearm manufacturing. I said, okay, well, you have $5-6 million I don't know about? Well, no. Well, okay, so that's out. Well, I could go get loans and apply. No. I'm actually not a huge advocate of startup funding, not from a loan-based perspective. Now, if it's a supply demand or a construction project, that's a little different. But I'm not a huge fan of it when it comes to startups. So I said, no, don't do that. Do you have any talent? And he could draw. I said, oh, we'll have you in business by Tuesday. And this is a piece of cake. So we had $75 for red tape regulation, right, to keep me out of business. We had $75 for regulation, and this was in Seattle. So we went to an Italian restaurant, right, and we said, okay, this is the deal. This guy wants to draw caricatures of tourists, right? That's going to be his little startup business. We need about $500 to get started. $75 for the regulation, for the street vendor permit, and then the other money for supplies, easel, pens, or whatever you do the thing with. And in exchange for that, he will hand out a coupon to all these tourists for your Italian restaurant. Now, if any of you actually own businesses, $500 to get somebody to actually hand a coupon to somebody is extremely cheap. I mean, that's crazy cheap. So the Italian restaurant's like, yes, please. So we got him in business for nothing. The last time I talked to him, he was making over $70,000 a year, working 4 days a week, and he's happy as a lark. Coincidentally, the guy who he was working for, who was doing the refi, and he had a multi-million-dollar business, is making $65,000 a year take home, and is stressed all get out, and he's going to have a coronary. So you really have to look at what's the point of being in business.